The year is 1936. A man known as Francisco Franco has taken control of almost half of Spain. With Nazi Germany and Italy backing him up, he then forces thousands and thousands of Republicans to death or exile from the country. He claimed to have once over 25,000 Republican prisoners in his grasp. Many people believe that the culture of a country is determined by its present and future occurrences. While I personally believe that in order to learn about the culture, we have to look back at what we did wrong to know what parts we can keep for now and use for the future. That's why today, instead of looking at modern culture of Spain, we're going to go back to around 1936, or when the Spanish Civil War began, and look at the culture from that time and see what we can carry on to now and what we need to leave in the past.
One of the main problems during this time period was that this man Franco, in front of you, was backed by the Catholic Church at the time due to left wings wanting to remove the church from everyday life.
While the Catholic Church was aligned with Franco, they began using the fascist salute as they spoke, and they also began preaching hate about the left wings as they started blessing the nationalists. Now, this wouldn't be a problem except for the fact that the Republicans on the other side of the fence during that time allowed women to start joining political parties, trade unions, and the women actually began forming their own political groups without need or permission from anybody.
In order to know the impact on what had been occurring at this point, you'd have to know that about half of the income from Spain was from agriculture, and about 2/3 of its exports were from agriculture as well. There was about 70%, according to socialistworker.org, there were about 70% of the population in Spain worked land at the time, which after the war, many were crippled with the cleaning up and dealing with the war. According to selfed.org, around the 1930s, the church started losing its position in Spain as its main sole person to go ask and figure out the culture of. People started living together despite not being married, which back then it was a big deal for the church to not give you permission for that, because marriage was a way for you to unite one another and live together like that. But people stopped getting married. A lot of women back in the day used to think that that was a way for the church and men to have control over them through the marriage. So they stopped getting married through the church, and later on during the Civil War, people actually just didn't do church weddings after a while. After a long while, they just stopped going to them, started getting married in small town, little get-together type things. But there were a lot of things going on at the time that the church didn't approve of. For instance, in December of 1936, legal abortion was passed, which the church's stance on that was obviously not on par with what the people passing it thought. According to History.com, following Franco's death on November 20th, 1975, he had appointed Juan Carlos I as the next successor. One of the first things Juan Carlos did was basically make Spain a democracy. Once Franco's successor, Juan Carlos I, took charge and made the country back to a democracy, big changes started taking place in the culture. For example, instead of getting onto women for using contraceptives, they legalized them. Contraceptions were legalized, it was allowed, and they allowed abortion later on, my correction from earlier, and women could actually join the workforce finally, which previously before that they'd been barred from doing. They were supposed to stay at home, be a stay-at-home wife, do nothing more, nothing less. Later on into it, divorce was legalized as well, so if you were in a terrible relationship, you could get divorced without having to go through the church. And today, many Spaniards ignore what the church says and how their teachings are and all that because they're still pretty conservative about it. But people have evolved nowadays to have a less strict view of everything. So actually about 3% of Spaniards nowadays don't even see religion as a super important thing. They still see it, but they still don't think it's that important as it once was. With so much change happening in such a short amount of time, it's no wonder that 3% of Spain now believes that religion is not as important, according to Eurobarometer 69 from 2008. But I hope from this speech that you've learned what type of things influence culture from the past and what types of things we should carry on to the future for future generations to use in their culture and to be proud of when they look back.